Hi, and welcome to Sid Did Scientology, Chapter 2. The early years, I suppose. A little bit of background to start in the beginning. Okay, let's start with my mom. My mom was born in 1929. She was born in Mountain View, California. The generations of California in my family, I think my daughter is 7th generation. So we go back in California ways. So mom was born in Mountain View in 1929. She and my aunt Shirley were close in age. My mom was the youngest of 3. So I had my Aunt Lee, my Aunt Shirley, my Aunt Lee was the oldest, my Aunt Shirley, and then my mom. And my mom and my Aunt Shirley were basically child prodigy pianists. And they started playing in concerts when mom was 4 and Shirley was 6, around Northern California. I think occasionally somewhere in Nevada, but mostly Northern California in the Bay Area. And it was a really strict upbringing for them. At some point, my grandmother and grandfather, my mom's folks, split up. And he didn't necessarily agree with how the girls were being raised so strictly, and just it was constant piano, piano, piano. And at that time they were playing classical music, and they played often on the same piano. They also played on separate pianos when they were playing in concert. They, at some point, their hands were injured and they couldn't really play with other kids. I think they were pretty much homeschooled until they went to, they had moved to St. Helena, Angwin, California. So Northern California. In Angwin, I start thinking of the things I remember from being there. But they were raised pretty much up there, went to school finally up there. They were raised Seventh-day Adventists, and what that meant to me hearing about it was no jewelry, no makeup. Of course, women weren't wearing pants too often then, but always dresses. When her and my dad got married, instead of a ring, she got a watch. Later on, she got a ring, but when they were there, she got a watch. I have the watch, so that's kind of nice. And what else? My grandmother, being strict, was also strict with punishments. So to give you some background on how my mother learned to punish, if my grandmother thought that any of the girls were lying, she would basically waterboard them in the bathtub. Hot water, face up, until they admitted they lied, whether they had lied or not. My Aunt Shirley, who sleepwalked, on occasion, was tied either to my mom or to the bed or both, so she couldn't get loose. I don't know if that was really a punishment or just how they thought of handling it at the time, sleepwalking. This is a gross one, but it was passed on. If you ate something you didn't like, or there was food that you didn't want to eat, it would stay on your plate until you ate it. So if you didn't eat it that night, you had it for breakfast the next morning. It was, yeah, kind of disgusting. Trying to think of, I can't really think of too many more of those, but it was a pretty strict upbringing for all of the girls. My aunt did a lot of the housekeeping and taking care of things, while my mom and my Aunt Shirley my Aunt Lee took care of all the things. My mom and Aunt Shirley were usually being taught. And my grandmother initially taught them at piano, and then later on they got a lady called Mrs. Kennedy, who was known pretty well in Northern California as a piano teacher, well-known piano teacher. She later, don't totally count on my facts here, but I believe she taught I think she taught President Johnson's daughter to play piano also. I know there was a connection with her and President Johnson later on. So anyway, Mills College. They played often at Mills College, and I think that's where, which is also in Northern California, and where Mrs. Kennedy taught also, besides teaching them privately. So it wasn't until they were in Angwin, they went to PUC, Pacific Union College, up in Angwin, Seventh-day Adventist College, Seventh-day Adventist, excuse me, Seventh-day Adventists had their own schools there. And the area that they lived in was mostly Seventh-day Adventists. Which then brings me to my dad. My dad was born, they called it Deer Park, but it was and they called it the sanitarium, which has a whole different meaning now than it did at the time. But it's where a place where people went to heal, went to get better, physically, mentally. But it wasn't like a state hospital thing for the mentally ill at the time. It was more of a, like I said, hospital area, place to get medical care, mental care that kind of, I guess, went along with the medical care, mud baths, other medicine. I don't know all the details. I know at some point my dad worked there, and so did my mother. So at different times they worked there. So they met, they overlapped, but let's kind of back up on Dad. Dad was born, Mom robbed the cradle. Dad was 2 years younger than Mom. He was born in 1931. And he was born in England then at Deer Park. He spent all his years until he went into the military in Angwin, in the area, working in the area. He's told lots of stories to us kids about the different vehicles they drove at the time, and also about his jobs, baling hay and all. This is before, because if you go down the hill from Angwin and go straight across the Napa Valley, you go straight through Calistoga and up the next mountain where later on my dad's sister and her husband, one of his sisters and their husband, lived up there. So I got really familiar with that area every time we would come back or come through the States or come visit family when we weren't traveling. Or when we were traveling to whichever the next place we were going to live was for a few years. So the valley wasn't, Napa Valley wasn't all grapes then. It was not even grapes then. It was farming, and it was hay and other produce, and that's what Dad did, is a lot of baling of hay and working and driving, farming, and that type of work. He also helped his dad, my grandfather, build their house that's still standing up there in St. Helena, or in Angwin. I keep saying St. Helena because we call it both. So when they did meet in school and when they did start dating, another thing about them being Seventh-day Adventists is they were vegetarian and raised vegetarian. So every once in a while they would sneak out somewhere for a burger. And that was, ooh, oh no. Do things like that. I remember Mom mentioning, or actually both of them at different times in later years had mentioned to me one of their dates. They were out by a lake, had one of driving, Dad was driving one of his cars, and they were doing a little making out in the car, and the car started rolling, and it wasn't on. The car started rolling toward the lake, and I remember that they had to get out of the stop the car, get out of the car, push the car back out of like the wetness and up the hill so they could make it home in time. Curfews, all those things. But they got married. When did they get married? Oh my goodness. When did they get married? Let's see. I have my ancestry over here to help me remember the things that I don't keep a lot of the details in here because I have ancestry, I have pictures, I have other places I can put it that help me remember so many things. So they got married April 8th, 1951. Mom was 21 years old. So Dad was, 19. Wow. They both got Dad got an A, Mom got a BA in music. It didn't say what Dad's A was in. I wouldn't be surprised if it was history. Dad has always really loved history. So when they got married, after they got married, I believe actually Dad was already in the military. It had just been in when they got married. So what year did they get married? 1951, and in 1951 Dad had joined the Air Force, and he had gone to Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas. I have like all the places where we lived as military, and then later on when I kept moving, the places that I lived after that. But yeah, so the first place he was stationed was at RAF, Royal Air Force, Sculthorpe, England, and my sister Marcella was born there in 1951. 1952. So anyway, he was there in 1951. Mom had never, I don't think she had even been out of California. And she went across the country, United States, and took a ship out of New York to go to England to meet him. Back then, you didn't just hop on a plane and go. So she hopped on a ship and went. And while they were there, my sister, Marcella, was born. And then when they came back from England after that time, Dad did leave the Air Force. They lived in Napa, and I think they were like a couple of years, and then he decided to go back in the Air Force, which was probably a good choice. He spent another 20-something years in. So they lived in Napa for a while, and when he joined up again, he was stationed at Travis, and so I was born at Travis, and which is interesting because after living in all of these other places, I live in Stockton, California. I've ended up 60 miles basically from where I was born, so that's pretty interesting, but California's always been home. I always come back here, no matter where I've lived, I always come back home. And let's see, so after I was born, I was 6 months old, and we moved to Arizona. And then after Arizona, we moved to, so Napa, I was born at Travis in Fairfield. We went to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. Of course, I don't remember any of it. And after that, Dad was sent back to England. This time, I don't know if he went first. I know when we came back, we all came back together, but I believe that he went again, and Mom took me and Marcella again across the country, took a ship to get there. And then my brother was born there, so I used to always tease them that since they were born in England, they couldn't be president. I could be president because I was born in the States, but I don't know. It's not a job I ever wanted, but it was fun to tease them when we were little, saying, I could be president and you can't, because RAF bases are not Air Force Base, United States Air Force bases, so they're not considered American soil. And we had a deal, like, with the English since World War II that they could use our planes. It was, that's how it was during the war, is we were fighting there, but it was like a rental deal on our equipment. And it was something that had still gone on. I don't know if it's still set up that way, but it's always been a team thing. Okay, so Gary was born then in England, but he was born, because when we went there that time, it was RAF Marham in England. Now, it was around that time in England that I really started I remember a few things. I remember seeing my sister go to school in her plaid, English plaid, the little skirt. It was what they call it, pleated skirt, a little pleated plaid skirt, white shirt, I think. The plaid was like red and black. The shirt was white, I think. I remember a playhouse we had behind where we lived. I kind of remember playing with some of the friends that we had made, because when we were there, it was off-base housing, both times. Mom and Dad, the first time when Marcella was born, it was off-base housing, and which means it's in another town, another area, and then Dad would commute to the base, or when Mom needed to deliver a baby, had to commute to a base. So I remember that. I remember, and when I think of saying this, because I don't get it right anymore, I had an English accent at the time, and I remember standing at the top of the stairs, and Mom was like, come down for something or other, and I was like, but Mother, I can't do it properly. Now, I can just imagine apostate Alex and Kelly Copter, please don't cringe too badly because of that. It was right then, it's totally off now. But I do remember that. I remember getting ready for a party, and I have pictures of my sister and I and our friends outside on the porch during or after this party. And I was in a white dress, but I remember getting ready for the party, and I'm, with Mom, and she's helping me get dressed. God, I have to look. 1959 to 61. So I was like going on around 3 to 4, somewhere in there. I don't remember things most of the time by age. That's why I have to look. I remember years and where I lived, but I don't really associate it with how old I was. So I have to do the math. But I do remember getting ready for this party and looking in the mirror after Mom got me dressed, and I was like, oh, I look so pretty. And oh my God, I don't recall, and you're young, so I don't know, may have been other things happening at different times, but I remember this one for sure. I remember being shocked. I remember being shocked that I was being yelled at. And I was being told, you don't say that. You never say that. It's vain. You never say that about yourself, ever. It's a horrible thing to do, horrible thing to say. And so I remember crying a lot. And I remember going to the party feeling like I was no longer pretty. I was pretty darn ugly, is how I felt. I didn't know what vain meant at the time. I just knew I was bad. So I went to this party feeling bad. And I pretty much am the family history keeper with pictures. I have pictures going back generations before me, tin-type pictures that I still have in boxes and scans of, but it goes way back. But it's always fascinated me that I see the pictures and the pictures look like one thing, but oftentimes the story is different than the picture. And that's how I think of those pictures of me and my sister and the other kids hanging out, getting our picture taken on the porch. I was bad. So that's my first time ever feeling I was a bad person that I remember. So, and I say these things, and there will be other things like that to kind of give you insight to how my life went later. So after living in England and after we left England, and I do have ancestry is great. I'm able to get copies of the tickets of, well, what do they call it, on a boat or on a ship? The something or other, the list of everybody's names who, when they traveled and all that. You can get all of that stuff on Ancestry now, which is really, really fun. I'll go off into a thing on Ancestry later on. But let's see, we left there at RAF Marham in England, and in 61 to 62 we were at Patrick Air Force Base, Cape Canaveral, Florida, which later became Cape Kennedy, and then went back to Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center. So at that time while we were there, it was Cape Canaveral. And I do remember things, a lot of great things from Florida, even though I was pretty little. Let's see, 60, 61, 62, 57, 59, 60. So 4 or 5, I'm 4 or 5 years old then when we lived there. But in those years, those were the years for the race to the moon. And we're right there at what's now Kennedy Space Center. And there were rockets and tests and things going up so many nights. It just seemed to be like at least every other night we would go outside and see something taking off into space. And it was just an incredible time, even as a little kid, you know, aware of, especially being military kids, aware of like what's happening. We're in this, you know, space race to the moon. And it was really exciting, and it was fabulous to just see these rockets taking off into the sky, just the bright and the arc, and it was just an amazing thing. And we had a lanai, and I remember being out on the lanai and just watching rockets take off so often. What else do I remember from there? I remember playing more, you know, the three of us, my older sister and my brother and I. So I kind of just remember kid things. I always, after there and later, not when we were in England, I remember, because we always had a different place to live, I remember the floor plans, you know, of what they were. So I remember the floor plan there. The only other thing that I really remember that kind of stands out, like the preview to, or what happened before the party in England. I remember playing outside with another kid that's probably my age, and it's Florida and it's hot, and we had like I don't know if it was like a teepee tent or a tent. It was a little tent, like a pup tent or something, and it was in the front yard, and I remember it being hot. And I don't know if you're still, God, what age was I? But I remember me and this kid, and it was a boy, but it's not like I thought boy, girl. It's not like I thought anything. We thought we're hot, and we took off our clothes, and we're still just playing with stuff, with toys and stuff, and we even started running around outside the tent. And my mom comes out and grabs me by the arm and tells the other kid to go home and takes me in the house. And she's like, and I had longer hair then. And she said, you can't be naked outside and stuff. And well, that makes sense. I could grasp that. And then it got worse. It was how bad I was, and that I couldn't play with that boy again, and that you don't get naked in front of boys. And she sat me down on we had this like stool where you could sit, and it had a back, but it had a couple steps up to it, and it was like a yellow vinyl thing. It was very 60s. Sat me on there, stuck a towel around my neck, and cut my long hair off into, that's when the pixies started. Little bangs that are, I got a good sized forehead, but the bangs were like, middle of the forehead, no hair. So, felt bad. I'm a bad person. So, the I'm a bad person things are adding up. That I really kind of recall. So let's see, do I remember much else of Florida? I don't, but God, watching those rockets take off all the time, that's one of the greatest memories of my life, is seeing that as a little kid and knowing what was going on. So we went from Cape Canaveral to, which one? 63 to 64, McConnell Air Force Base, Wichita, Kansas. I remember more things from there. I remember all of us going down in the basement whenever there was tornado warning. And we kept our little, back then you could still have those little turtles, I forget what they're called, but the little green turtles that you can't get anymore, that always climbed out of their little, like, cute little swimming pool thingy that had a little island and a tree on it. And we'd find them behind the basement furniture and the corners and stuff, covered in dust later on. I don't know how many of those we went through. So I remember hiding from tornadoes. I remember before we had to hide from the tornadoes, I remember we had to crack all the windows open all around the house so the pressure wouldn't build up. I don't remember being too awfully scared or anything. None ever hit right where we were, so that was good. Another good reason not to be scared at the time. I remember thunderstorms, and that's when I first actually started really loving thunderstorms. Once I understood the lightning, which is the thing to be more afraid of than the thunder, is the lightning is the scary thing. The thunder is just a sound. And in the Midwest, it's amazing sound. It just rattles the house and the windows and the ground, and it's thunderous. But it's really, God, I love a good thunderstorm. A really good thunderstorm, and we hardly ever get thunderstorms like that in California. but I have lived in other places where we've had them. But so I remember the thunderstorms. I remember having a pool in probably 2 or 3 feet high. I don't think I was even 3 feet, or Gary. So probably like I still think it was like a 3-foot pool, maybe 10 to 12 feet diameter above ground, you know, plastic bottom and plastic sides. And I remember Dad pouring chlorine and stuff into it to keep it clean. And I also remember at some point, what did he put in there? I think a snapping turtle, some kind of, I'm pretty sure snapping turtle, few fish at some point. So I don't remember swimming in it as much as watching other things swim in it. I remember getting bit by a dog that lived a couple houses down. The dog's name was Cindy Lou, and I remember getting bit by it. I don't remember like stitches or anything. I remember they had to keep it in the basement for a while. I guess they were like, I hear like rabies, but I didn't know anything. I remember Barbies were just getting big around that time, and a lady, another couple houses over, sewed Barbie clothes. And I remember Mom getting us Barbie clothes and stuff that way. I remember in the house layout, back door into the kitchen, through the kitchen to a hallway with the front door. The hallway into the living room, and then was there a dining room? I think there was like a dining, but we didn't use it. We used was it on the other side? It was on this side. Anyway, living room, dining room, kitchen, but living room, dining room were all together. This time it was on base housing, I believe. So we lived on base. And there's a lot of base housing back in those years. It was Vietnam War, so a lot of families moving around all the time. But I remember that was our racetrack, me and Gary running around there. And I remember one time he was running around there and he hit, maybe we'll get to see him some point. One or the other eyebrows got taken out on one of those metal towel racks in the kitchen. Just the right height, bam, and he had to get a couple stitches. And then I remember playing out in the front yard with a rope, like a jump rope, and I'm spinning this jump rope, and I would not try to hit him, but anyway, he either walked into it or somehow, you know, kid stuff, and it hit and it opened it up again, so he had to go back and get more stitches from the jump rope. What else do I remember from Kansas? Oh, food. This is where I noticed things started with food for me. One of the funny things is I remember looking around for something to eat, and at that age I was climbing up on the kitchen counters and I got really high in a cupboard and I saw what I thought was brown sugar. Like, whoa, I can get a spoonful of brown sugar. So I grab a spoon and open up this Tupperware and take a big old bite of brown sugar, and it was wheat germ. Oh yeah, totally the opposite. Brown sugar is wheat germ. I don't know what you keep wheat germ for, not, you know, but wheat germ. So that was disgusting. I remember being at school. I don't think I did kindergarten, so I started first grade. I somehow between Florida and Kansas missed kindergarten, started first grade. And we had we had hanger things for our jackets, for our lunch pails, whatever, outside the room. But it was in a real hallway, not like out here in California where it's open hallways, outdoor hallways to a lot of the schools. It's not indoor hallways. And I remember like asking to go to the bathroom and then going out and like opening people's lunches and taking food. And don't remember ever getting caught, but I definitely remember doing it. So that's the first food things I remember. Trying to get food, have food, wanted food. So, yeah. So that was that. What else? I remember Christmases. I remember our dog Farfel. We got a dog. Farfel was like, if you're, you know, in my like level of years, you might remember, I can't remember her name. Oh my God. She was a ventriloquist and she had a lamb chop, and she had Farfel. And later on, she sold the rights to Farfel to Nestle because Farfel then would say, Nestle's is the very best chocolate. So our dog's name, and he was a black standard sized poodle with big old red eyes, and his name was Farfel. So yeah, love Farfel. We all love Farfel. So I remember Christmas pictures with Farfel. Oh, I remember having, I got the measles, or no, chicken pox. I remember having the chicken pox when we lived there. So bad. And I remember Dad giving me a bath, and to get the fever down, cold bath and stuff, and what they pour into the bath. I don't remember, but cold bath. And I remember getting out and him rubbing me down with a towel like this, which kind of felt good because it scratched the chicken pox. But oh my God, it was a white towel. I remember just blood spots all over it and all over me. But yeah, it still felt good to get all, scratched when you have chicken pox. What else? Oh, I think this is somewhere around the time when I started sucking my thumb. Yeah, my good old thumb. The thumbs, both thumbs would get sucked. Favorite, second best. Yeah, so that started around then too. I remember having a nightmare, and it was probably another time when I was sick and waking up to a nightmare and seeing all of these like faces coming at me in this nightmare, and I felt like I was awake, so I didn't think it was a nightmare. And all these faces are coming at me. I remember getting up and going to Mom and Dad's room, and I couldn't talk. And it was just miserable. So I remember that. So I remember a lot of kid things from Kansas. Let's see, before we move on to Washington State, is there anything else about Kansas? Let's see, 63, 64. I also have over here my photo computer. Let's see, 63. Nothing in particular. I do have like school pictures, so-and-so's the teacher and all the kids are lined up and all of those. And then pictures of clothes that you see now on retro things. It's so funny. Just even kids' clothes. Oh, that's when I remember, I don't remember from England, but my dad has always had a thing for cars. He built his first car out of parts of cars when he still lived in Angwin. So his cars has been his thing always. And when we were in England, which I don't really remember, but I do have pictures of it. God, if I can remember what it was called. A Ford Anglia. He got an Anglia there. And I believe that was the same car where he got in trouble at work. At one point, because may or may not have been the Anglia where the roof leaked, and our family jewels are a roll of duct tape, and Dad got green duct tape because military stuff, so they had green duct tape, and the car was green, so he duct taped in both directions, the whole roof of the car. And of course his boss is gonna see it. Like, where'd you get the duct tape? So yeah, he got in trouble for that. But it worked. The roof didn't leak anymore. As long as you put duct tape on dry, it'll get through the wet. So there he had a Ford Anglia. When we then were in Kansas, I don't remember car-wise in Florida, but when we got to Kansas, he got an MG. Let's see if it says anything. It doesn't say what year. No, Mom's just putting the... But it was a little black MG. I think he painted on the orange racing stripes, like the thick one and the thin one, through, and it was a convertible. So that was his sports car. So that's the first car I remember personally, Dad having, and there'll be cars all the way through our lives. That was a thing. Let's see, Farfel, and the MG. Me and Gary, the trip west. And most of the time when we were in between places we were going to live, we would come to California and see family. So we were moving to Washington, or from Kansas, so it was straight shot California, and then we went north to Washington. When we would see family, we would usually have like some kind of reunion, which was always nice. And we would see both sides of the family because my mom's folks and my dad's folks lived within a mile of each other. And both their houses are still standing, which is kind of amazing. But at my mom's mom, my Grandma Morris' house, they had a willow tree that my mom and my step-grandfather, but Grandpa Morris, had planted when it was like 3 feet tall. And I think Mom said that she was about 3 feet tall when they planted it, but that may have been something, because she would have had to have been older before her folks split up, I think. Anyway, they planted the willow tree when it was about 3 feet tall. And then later on, when the tree got bigger, my grandpa put an outlet in, like on the tree. So when we were outside under the tree, you could have electricity out there. I remember years later, the tree growing over the outlet. I remember watching when we would come through at different times, watching this outlet go away. But that tree, I have later pictures of it, but we had our family reunions under the tree. It was perfectly groomed. It was perfect, like umbrella willow tree. And Grandpa would cut an archway out behind it, so you could, an archway so you could go through it to where all the tables would be set up underneath. So the tables are going around underneath, and all the willow branches are out and about around you. And willow trees then have always been my favorite tree. I just the tree itself, let alone being able to have whole family reunions under a willow tree. It was just fabulous. And he would cut it off just right at the grass. And yeah, there was a little OCD on the step family too. There was a lot of it in my immediate family. So anyway, I remember the tree. So seeing family there, and then we went up to Spokane, and what's the name of that one? From 65 to 67, we were at Fairchild Air Force Base, Spokane, Washington. And, okay. Getting older, remembering more. Let's see. So I would have been like 8 to 10 years old when we lived there. don't remember what grades it was. I took ballet while we lived there, and then Mom took me out of it because the teacher was actually French and she refused to call me Cindy. She always called me Cynthia. And I loved ballet, and I was there long enough, excuse me, to do 2 recitals, so she couldn't have taken me out of it too long before we left there. But let's see, 1 recital, and of course you have the little outfits and stuff, and it's the 60s. And so they're little mini skirt things and, you know, bright patterns and solid color blocking. And one of the songs I remember were "These Boots Were Made for Walking." And God, what was her name? Nancy Sinatra. "These boots are made for walking." So we had like little white boots, you know, little go-go boots that only like came up halfway up your calf, if that. Yeah, so that was when go-go boots were in. And that's when I first started becoming really familiar with music. Now, I was really familiar with Mom playing music because we had, not in England either time, I don't recall in Florida either, but when we went to Kansas, Mom started teaching at a Hammond organ studio. She would teach people that wanted to learn and wanted to buy an organ. She would teach them to play the organ. When she had left home, she had basically quit the piano, and then she switched to organ, which she truly loved the organ. And my grandmother thought, oh, that's awful, but my mom loved the organ. And my aunt also did the same, and then later on my Aunt Lee learned how to play the organ, so they all got into the organ. But she got a Hammond organ when we lived in Kansas and also taught there. And so then when we would move, and the military would move us, they would also move the organ. And I remember Mom, every place we moved to and from, like freaking out when that organ was going out and when the organ was being moved back in to wherever we were next. And yeah, so I did grow up from that point hearing very little classical, but a lot of like current pop music. Like "These Boots Were Made for Walking." That would have been in those years. The Twist in Kansas. I remember the Twist came out when I was in Kansas. And so a lot of the pop music, and she had loads and loads and loads of music. But so that's when I started becoming more familiar with music, or listening familiar with music. So when we were in Washington, she also had an organ set up there. A little later on, though, she did get a piano, and she set them both up at an angle. And through the years, this was pretty normal to see that she would play the organ and piano at the same time. You got to remember, Mom was like child prodigy pianist, and she was just brilliant playing music, just brilliant. So it was always fun to see her playing both at the same time. And then I have a mirror. Will this work? Oh, no, because it's following me. I have a mirror, right? How can I get it to do this? No, do it. See that mirror right there? That's one of the mirrors that Mom, the last mirror she had that was over her. Let's see if I can get this to, there we go. Hello. Okay. So she always had a mirror up over the organ, like if the organ were facing the wall, which it usually did. She'd have the mirror on that wall at a tilt, so she could still see the audience, family, whoever was there while she was playing. She could see them behind her, and you could also see her. and she could talk while she was playing or whatever. Now, it didn't show low enough to show keys or anything, but it showed her so she could, you know, be one with her audience and take requests and all of that. So there was always a mirror over the organ from the first one in Kansas. So this is the last mirror that she had over her last organ after she passed away, or before she passed away. So I love having it here. When I look in it, I see Mom in the mirror. Okay, so where are we? We're in Washington. Yeah, so she's playing music. And that was my initial thing with music. Now, okay, when did I start? I'm kind of, let me just see if it'll let me look. Please let me look. I don't know that I can. Anyway, I think I've got like 15, 20 minutes left. So Washington was where things started to change. A lot. We were being, let's see, well, Dad was at work. Dad was almost always at work. Mom was home, an at-home mom. 3 kids. I'm not going to try and say how it was for her. I don't know how it was for her. I know how it was for us. It had always been, and it was becoming even more so, that be seen and not heard. There was never any real conversations. I don't think there were ever any real conversations even before that point. At the dinner table even, I don't remember conversations. I don't remember, I do remember being told, do this, do that, do the other thing. I do remember being told that this, that, and the other thing were done wrong. I don't remember ever being told, sometimes, like dusting, how you dust the organ. You dust it with a lightly damp cloth with the wood grain. And a Hammond organ came with a Leslie speaker, a big speaker that had a spinning wind thingy on the inside that would push the sound out of the speaker. Real wood. It was mahogany back in those days. Mahogany was big back in those early 60s, mid 60s days, later 60s. Through the 60s, mahogany was a big deal. So the organ was mahogany. Anyway, I remember being told how to dust. But most of the things you were told to do, and then you were told how wrong you did them, without being told how to do them right. I didn't have like a break from that then when we lived in Washington. I remember then there was, I don't know, much more tension, much more anger. Mom was an angry person then. And being a kid, I didn't know why, what was happening. So what are some of the things I remember from Washington? I remember my sister. I remember standing in, I always shared a bedroom either with my brother or with my sister. And I was the clean freak and they weren't, so I always also did the cleaning of those rooms. But I remember all 3 of us standing in Marcella's and my, at that time, bedroom, looking out the window and across, because we were right on the edge of off-base housing. Behind us was all forest, like Washington forest. It was amazing, especially after coming from Kansas, where it was flat ground grass. And this was out the back door, forest, amazing pine forest. Anyway, I remember the three of us standing in Marcella's and my bedroom, looking out the window, and right across the street, from that direction, across the street, was an open field, and then there was a house off to the right, but open field. And there were these boys beating up this other boy, and that's all I knew, is some boy was beating up this other boy. And my sister opened that window, pushed out the screen, went out the window, went over there, and just, I remember like seeing her fist, but I've seen her fist later too, so I know what her fist looks like. And she just wailed on like these three other older boys, older than that boy. I think they were probably about my sister's age. And she just, what are you doing? What are you beating on him? And he was mentally challenged. We didn't use that word at the time. And they're just like beating the crap out of him. So she beat the crap out of them till they all took off running. And I was like, I felt really proud of her. Really proud of her for doing that. So that stands out. And then what else? Along with the ballet, I remember being in outside our class waiting to go into class in the morning, and I could do that kick where you kick like, you know, above your head. I did that and went down on my ass. It was so embarrassing, but only for a minute. But yeah, that was pretty embarrassing. There we go, thing off balance. So I do remember that. I remember playing on the jungle gym and doing, you know, you could do flips and stuff on it. And I remember once I realized when I did a flip, I hadn't put on my underwear that day. Nobody could tell, but it stands out in my head. Oh, what other stuff like that? Nothing. Now, I also remember we weren't allowed to have snacks between meals. And just gonna go into it. What was it? Mom yelling. One of us kids stole a bag of Fritos from the cupboard. Now, this is right when the little mini lunch bags of like Fritos, Lay's potato chips, whatever came with those. I don't know if they had barbecue, whatever. But one of us kids stole a bag of Fritos out of the cupboard. That's how not between meal snacks it was. We never took food out of the fridge or out of the cupboards. And that may have been the situation, excuse me, that may have been the situation also in Kansas, but I don't remember for sure, which is why I was hunting through cupboards for food and stealing food from school kids. But somebody stole a bag of Fritos, and Mom was yelling about it, and I know I didn't steal it, so that's all I know. I don't know who had it, so I don't know which one of the other two stole the Fritos. I remember Dad coming home. I don't remember how Mom's conversation went with him, but I remember his belt coming off. Let's see, he had his fatigues on, I believe. No, not his fatigues. But it was not the blue uniform, not the dress uniform. It was the one that was tan, beige color. And the belt was like yay thick, not like, you know, like a belt, not a 3-inch belt, not a 2-inch, it was like, you know, about the width of the belt. But it was a military belt, so it was like that rolled nylon belt. And it had the metal clasp buckle where it was, you know, you put it on and it lays down and it's flat like silver on top. And I remember him taking that belt off. I remember one or the other of them had us line up, the three of us, with bending over the couch. And it was my sister, me, and my brother. So older sister, me, younger brother. And he started with my sister, beating her ass with that belt, that nylon, rolled nylon, inch wide belt. And then me. So I remember Marcella's crying and screaming, and then I'm crying and screaming, and then he started on Gary. And I noticed, even though I'm going through what I'm going through, he's hitting Gary harder, and he's the littlest. And then he started again, trying to find out who stole this bag of Fritos. And then it was Marcella again, and then me again, and then Gary again. And I noticed again, he's beating on Gary harder than Marcella and I. This happened 3-4 times, and then finally, me, who was the middle kid, tried to keep peace, try to be good, even though I know, you know, through the years already how bad of a person I am. Stood up to my dad, who was just moving, just like my dad was like my idol. And I remember standing up and screaming at him, "Why are you hitting Gary the hardest? He's the littlest." And I was just so angry at him, and to the point that I'm yelling at my dad. I don't know that I had ever yelled at either of my parents, but I was livid. It was just too much. Besides what was happening, it was too much. And then he just, you know, bent over that couch and started again. Now I don't know, and it fucking hurt. And we're all crying, we're all screaming and crying. They're screaming, or mom's screaming, "Who stole a bag of Fritos?" Stole the bag of Fritos out of your own house, out of your own cupboard. And all of a sudden, and I don't remember who was getting hit at the time or next, we didn't say anything, the three of us, but we all three got up, and I took off out the back door, which was just to the left of the couch. My brother took out through the garage door, was open to the garage, and the garage door was open to outside. And my sister took off out the front door. I don't know when they came back, but out the back door, some yard, go through the opening in the barbed wire fence and into the forest. And I don't know how long or how far I ran. And crying, and it's evening, and crying, and I remember just getting lost in the running. And I was really well coordinated back then. I was taking ballet back then. I could do a leap. And I'm running through the forest, which has little creeks, rocks, pine cones, and I was just thrilled with the accuracy of my feet. Just anything that took my attention off of what was happening, so I just ran. And I don't know how long I was gone. I came back and it was dark, and I really don't remember anything about anything after that evening. And it wasn't till years and years later, when, God, we were, I think, adults, when I found out who stole the Fritos. But we'll get to that a few levels later. So that was fucking awful. And we had been spanked before, and my sister well, not then, I don't remember it then. That was the first escalation of something that I really remember went all to hell. That was the first one. Yeah, so I think it's almost an hour. Is there anything else from Washington? Oh, we did get a car, a new car. God, what year? It was actually totally new. I think it was, even though it was 60, we were there 65, 67. I think we did get it in 67 because we went to Guam in June or July. I know when let's see, June or July. Ziggy, when was the first moon landing?
The first crewed moon landing occurred on July 20th, 1969, when Apollo 11 astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin touched down on the lunar surface.
Thanks, Ziggy. That's all.
This historic
Ziggy,
event
stop.
marked humanity's first steps.
Ziggy, stop. Okay, so it was July of 67 when we went to Guam. So we got the car before we went to Guam and had it shipped to Guam. So it was a 67 Chevy Impala in midnight purple with a white convertible top. It was amazing. And I believe that's when I first started falling in love with cars. So yeah, so anything else from Washington? Oh my God, let me, that's then 64, 5, that was Kansas. That was the trip to Spokane. Oh, we did go to the Space Needle. We went to Grand Coulee Dam, Mount Rainier, and those were while we were there in Washington. And I believe at some point we did go to Canada too, like just over the border, Vancouver or something. Well, I hope I have that right. And back. And then we went to California for family reunion and left there for Guam. That would have been in July of 1967 when we left Washington and went to Guam. I'm trying to think. Oh, there is one more thing that I really remember from Washington. One Thanksgiving, we had company over for Thanksgiving and all the food. And there were garbanzo beans. Didn't know what they were, whatever. Had a bite, gagged, like totally gagged. Gagged and spit them back out onto my plate. And in a not very ladylike fashion. And immediately yelled out by my mother in front of everybody, "Eat those garbanzo beans." And I was like, but they're awful. I can't stand them. I remember sitting there till bedtime. And I remember trying to eat them at different points and then spitting them out again. And I sat there until bedtime, and then I went to bed. And guess what was on my plate for breakfast? Before school? I think there was school. Was there school? There was something. Maybe it was just more people coming over. I don't know if you got the whole, I don't remember. I just remember that they were there for breakfast. And to this day, my least favorite food in the whole universe, garbanzo beans, which are also called chickpeas, which they also use to make hummus. Oh my God. and they flavor it and all that stuff. And people, like, if you were to say, what's one thing that most people like that you don't like? Hummus. Oh, God, even the name is disgusting. So, yeah, it's me and garbanzo beans. But that, besides stealing wheat germ out of the cupboard in Kansas and stealing food from my classmates in school in first grade, and somebody stole Fritos out of the cupboard in Washington, and then here's your garbanzo beans the next morning. Food things started for me about that time. So, yeah, we'll go into some more food stuff later. But after Washington, and I'm pretty sure that pretty much covers Washington for this, after Washington, we moved to Guam. And I'll go into Guam next time. And we did have another family reunion before we went to Guam under the willow tree, which was amazing. And we did go to my dad's side of the family too and got pictures of everybody there. So, but that's all for next time. So anyway, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. The things start getting more full, memorable, bizarre as we start moving forward on Guam. People say in Guam. On. It's an island. You are on Guam. Anyway, I'll let you go from this one. Thanks for being here. Cindy Y. Davis at CYDdidScientology. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have fun out there and come back for the next trip to Guam.